Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever stopped to think about the phrase 6 feet under? We use it all the time to talk about death, but have you ever wondered if it's actually true? Are people really buried 6 feet deep? Well, the answer might surprise you. Today, we're redigging into the fascinating history and modern reality of burial depth to uncover why this famous phrase is more of a cultural myth than a hard and fast rule. Let's travel back in time to 1665 London. The city is in the grip of the Great Plague, a devastating epidemic that's claiming thousands of lives. Amid the chaos and fear, the Lord Mayor of London issues an order. All graves must be dug at least 6 feet deep. The idea was purely a public health measure. People believed, quite reasonably for the time, that burying the deceased deep in the ground would prevent the disease from spreading. They were terrified that contaminated air, or miasma rising from shallow graves, could infect the living. So, the 6-foot rule was born out of a desperate attempt to contain a deadly outbreak. It wasn't about tradition or respect. It was about survival. This historical event is the origin of our modern phrase. And it's pretty incredible to think that a 17th century public health decree still shapes our language today. But even before the Great Plague, grave depth was a practical concern. For centuries, people buried their dead deep enough for a few very logical reasons. First, you had to prevent animals from digging up the remains. Scavengers like wolves, foxes, or even domestic dogs were a real problem, and a shallow grave was an open invitation. Second, a deep burial helped contain the odors of decomposition, which was crucial in populated areas. And finally, digging deep ensured the ground above the grave would remain stable. You wouldn't want the earth to sink or collapse, especially in a community graveyard where people walked regularly. So even without a specific 6-foot rule, practical needs dictated that graves had to be sufficiently deep. Now, let's fast forward to the present day. If you visit a modern cemetery, you'll find that the 6-foot rule is rarely enforced. In fact, there's no universal law in most countries, including the United States or the United Kingdom, that mandates a 6-foot depth. Instead, the regulations are usually set at the local or state level, and they can vary dramatically. So, how deep are graves today? It really depends on the location. In many areas, the minimum depth required for a single grave is around 4 feet to the top of the coffin. Some cemeteries might only require 18 to 24 inches of soil on top of the casket or burial vault. Why the change? Well, modern burial practices are a lot different from those in the 17th century. The biggest factor is the use of sturdy sealed caskets and concrete burial vaults or grave liners. Back in the day, people were often buried in simple wooden coffins, or just a shroud. These materials would break down relatively quickly, leading to ground settlement and the other problems we mentioned. Today's caskets, often made of metal, and the reinforced concrete vaults that enclose them provide a much stronger barrier. They prevent the ground from caving in and protect the casket from the weight of the earth and heavy cemetery equipment. With this added structural integrity, there's simply no need to dig as deep as 6 feet. Soil conditions also play a huge role. Cemetery managers have to be geologists in a way. In areas with a high water table, digging too deep can mean hitting groundwater, which is something you definitely want to avoid. Digging a 6-foot grave in a marshy or coastal area could literally mean burying someone in a pool of water. In other places, the ground might be extremely rocky or hard, making deep excavation difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. So, cemeteries adapt to their local environment. They determine a practical depth that ensures stability and safety while working with the natural landscape. Another modern consideration is space. Cemeteries are facing a real estate crunch, just like our cities. Land is finite and expensive. By digging shallower graves, cemeteries can use their land more efficiently. Some cemeteries practice what's called double depth, or companion burials, where 2 caskets are stacked vertically in the same plot. The first burial is placed deeper, say at 8 feet, and the second is later placed on top, around 5 feet deep. This allows a family to be buried together without taking up 2 separate plots. It's a practical solution to a growing problem of limited cemetery space, especially in urban areas. So if the 6-foot rule is obsolete, why does the phrase 6 feet under persist so strongly in our culture? The answer is simple. It's catchy, dramatic, and a little bit spooky. It has become a powerful piece of cultural shorthand. Think about how it's used in movies, books, and music. It's a punchy, evocative way to talk about death without getting into the uncomfortable details. The phrase has taken on a life of its own, evolving from a specific measurement into a broader metaphor for being dead and buried. It's so ingrained in our language that most of us never even question its literal accuracy. It just sounds right. It's also interesting to see how this all connects to the emotional side of burial. For families grieving a loved one, the specific depth of the grave is rarely a top concern. What truly matters is the ritual, the sense of closure, and having a physical place to visit and remember. The headstone, the flowers, the peaceful atmosphere of the cemetery. These are the things that provide comfort. The technical details, like whether the grave is 4, 5, or 6 feet deep, are handled by cemetery professionals who are focused on ensuring the burial is safe, dignified, and respectful. Their job is to manage the logistics so that families can focus on their grief and remembrance. So, the next time you hear someone say 6 feet under, you can think of it as a historical echo, a ghost of a phrase from a time of plague and fear. It's a fascinating example of how language can preserve a piece of history long after the reality has changed. The world of burials has evolved from a simple hole in the ground to a complex process involving local laws, soil science, and modern materials. In the end, the story of 6 feet under is a reminder that many of the things we take for granted have surprising and complex histories. It's not just a spooky saying, it's a window into the past, showing us how our ancestors dealt with public health crises, and how our own practices have adapted to new technologies and new challenges. Modern burials are a blend of respect for tradition and practical scientific considerations, ensuring that our final resting places are both dignified and sustainable for generations to come. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into one of culture's most enduring phrases. If you found this interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the curious corners of our world. See you next time.